Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs podcast, the show for founders who want growth without the guesswork. Here we talk about AI and the systems driving predictable growth. And today we're joined by someone who's taken the guesswork out of one of the most anxiety-filled parts of anyone's professional life, career transitions. Dr. JuliAnna Sanchez-Stone has built a scientific model to help people land the roles they're more strongly aligned with, from high-level executives to new talent. And she blends data, emotional intelligence, and now AI to give job seekers a level of clarity that most will never experience. JuliAnna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. Let's kick things off. You've guided everyone from entry-level talent to the CTO of Microsoft and the CTO, Chief Talent Officer, at GitLab. How did you develop your expertise across a wide range of professionals?
So it really comes down to process. It's sort of like you turn the water faucet on, and the water has to go through a whole bunch of different, we'll call them curves and straight lines to get to the water faucet, but it always comes through. Sometimes it's air that comes through. It's a process, it's just that same flow. But there's stops along the way. Sometimes there's a curve. And so you have to look at each little curve or elbow as an individual opportunity to look at it differently and say, okay, now the water pressure has to push up or it has to push lateral or vertical. So that's how we came up with this model that really does extend from entry level all the way to CXO level.
And you built this model starting in between 2012, 2014. What actually sparked the creation?
That's a tough question because it's so emotional. I was an executive who had left a very, very lucrative position to come back home to Colorado and not really understanding what the job search market looked like. I set on course to find a job. I thought, how hard can it be? I have an MBA. I have coursework for a PhD. I have a doctorate and I've led large and small teams. I've built markets. I'm thinking this is going to be easy. 6 months later, after applying for 200 positions, Jay, I was still looking. I spoke to a lot of screeners, not understanding they were screeners. So I'd get really excited. It was like this roller coaster. And I would say to my husband, I'm so excited. I have an interview. And then it was a screener, and they would just ask me these really rudimentary questions. And I'm like, I'm not understanding this market. So I'm a researcher. I like scientific methods. And I started keeping spreadsheets, looking for trends. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And I couldn't put my finger on it. I just couldn't nail it. So after lots of prayers and frustration, I said, I have to stop this madness. So I stopped searching and I started researching. So I started researching the job search market only to find out that it's filled with a lot of innuendos, a lot of conjecture, a lot of opinions. And if you ask, I asked quite a few chief human resource officers, hiring managers, CEOs, what do you think it takes for someone to get a job? Well, there was one thing that they all had in common. One was that they had done a search in over 10 years, but yet they felt compelled to be able to give advice. And these were some of these CHROs were from Fortune companies. And it was really frustrating. So it said to me, they really don't understand what it feels like to be sitting on this side of the table. They know exactly how to hire the talent they want, but how does the talent know how to be hired? And so that started this whole process of research, surveying, just really trying to come up with this model, and finally came up with a really interesting model, and it's been extremely successful, and since then has turned into a scientifically proven model that if you follow the process works. Now there's a lot of monkey wrenches in there and lots of curves, and it's how people feel as they're going through it, because a job search Jen, is something that has the greatest impact on your health, your wealth, and your well-being. But no one really has a real model to say how to get from A to Z. You don't have a roadmap because there's so many variables, and that is the uniqueness of the human, where they're at in their life, where they want to go, gender, age, everything matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to dig into the model. You can give a high level overview, but before we dive into that, For the people that don't realize how complex these job transitions actually are, what is the biggest misconception?
That you simply create a resume and you start applying. That is the biggest misconception because I always equate it to painting a room. When you decide you're going to paint a room, you don't just go in there with a can of paint. You identify the swatch color, you see if it's going to blend well with your carpet or whatever it may be. Then you have to remove all of the furniture and you have to tape. So there's this whole process that goes in front of painting the room. If you do it correctly up front, the paint comes out pretty decent. However, if you don't, you're moving things and you're getting paint on your floor, on your desk, or whatever it may be. A job search is the same. Most people think they just walk into the room and start painting. In other words, they create a resume and now I'm going on a job search. And then they have to backtrack. Then they have to remove all the furniture. Then they have to go back in and tape. Now they're into it 2, 3 weeks and they're getting frustrated and they're getting concerned. And there's a lot of fear and anxiety that starts to build. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that you don't just create a resume and go out and start searching.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot too, as well, of people that start businesses. They have this expertise, but they don't necessarily know or have all the other additional skills which are required to building an actual successful business. You could be an expert in, let's say, painting, but if you don't know how to market, which is a different skill set altogether, you're going to end up just spinning your wheels, not going anywhere. But it's very similar. You need to have a roadmap, you need to have a system,
Correct.
or in your case, a model. So let's talk about the model a little bit.
Absolutely. So, our model starts out with a lot of assessments. It's really important to understand people's transferable skills. In this market, in particular, when I first started the company, it was very similar that the oil and gas industry was crashing, and we were having to take skills from people that were working in oil and gas and transition them into other markets. And so, it's the same thing now. So, you have to start to really understand a person. And you can't just go in there and start with a reverse chronological resume. I'm currently doing this, I did this, and then I did this. You have to really look at it from a much bigger picture. So we start with the assessments, we identify where those transferable skills are, but we also do a very intense intake because we want to know skills. We want to know where their wants are. We want to analyze what they've done, and then we want to break it down. I call it the reverse it is actually like reverse engineering their whole job search. So then you deconstruct their job search to reconstruct it to identify where they want to go. Now that becomes that point of interest. From that point of interest, like I said earlier, you can reverse engineer it to drive exactly where they have to be. So I like to look at it as the job search has two phases. And within those two phases, there's a lot going on. But you could equate it to a marketing campaign. At first, you have research. You have to research your product. You have to research the market. You have to look at the demographics that have the greatest need. Then, once you have all the research done, all of that intake of knowledge, then you move it into creating a marketing campaign. Now, how do I reach my demographic? How do I share my product or my service? Is it a billboard? Is it putting it on Sirius? Or am I going to go on cable? Or do I need to send out messages or newsletters? How do I reach my market? So we use that same type of thinking.
Hmm. Very, very interesting. So it's kind of like marketing.
It is. That's exactly. That's why we call it a when we work with someone, we launch their job search campaign. It is truly a job search campaign, but the campaign cannot happen until we have all of this other work done prior.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what's a cool transformation story that best captures the impact of your work? I'm sure you have many.
There are so many, and it is a very vulnerable time for people. I heard not too long ago someone say, I would never pay for a job search. And I was thinking, but yeah, if you have a cold, you'll go to the doctor and the doctor will prescribe you all these medicines. But then it's up to you to take the medication. We're the same here. If someone is really looking for that transformation, as you said, they have to work the process. So I think one of my favorite stories is this woman who had been in this really difficult situation in Oregon, and her company went defunct. She was brilliant, but by this time she was frustrated and had a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety because her job search wasn't moving. And so when she started working with us, I'm like, "You're brilliant. You actually have this potential to work in any of these types of companies." And she said, "Oh no, they probably would never even look at me." And I said, "You got to trust our process." So she went through our process, and we also help people identify companies that have the greatest demand, because now we're looking at demographics, right? They have a demand for someone. Let's go after that company. Let's not go after just the job. Let's go after the company. And Amazon just so happened to have a demand for someone like her. They were starting the EV accessories division. And I told her, "This is an ideal position for you." And she said, "They will never look at me." I said, "Trust me, follow our process." And she worked with one of our strategists, our chief strategist, actually. And it was last year, right before Christmas, she calls us both crying that she had gotten an interview. Now, what do we do? Well, we're not done. People now are aware of her, like a marketing campaign. They're aware of the product, but they haven't bought the product. How do we deliver the product in such a way that they said, "Oh, we really want this product. We don't only want it, we need it." So we started working with her on her interviewing. Right after Christmas, she came back with an amazing offer letter, an amazing relocation package, and the RSUs. She could probably retire in about 6 years to 8 years just on the RSUs. And that was unbelievable because we took someone from fear and doubt, frustration, doing things the way she had been told to do it, do your resume, just keep applying, to now we have someone who is sitting in a Fortune 5 company in a very influential role, who is going to be able to now take this knowledge that she has and help an organization transform as well.
Wow, that's a powerful story, especially when somebody's having this transition over the holidays, which we're in the holidays now.
I know.
I could tell you're very driven by your work and your overall mission. Let's talk about the business. So you've overcome definitely some problems. That's what entrepreneurs do. We're always solving problems for ourselves and for other people. But what what's a big lesson that maybe you've overcome, or what big problem you've overcome in your business to get you to this point now? Because you're helping a lot of
Yeah,
people. A lot of people are wanting to help a lot of people. What's worked
right.
for you?
Well, that is such a good question because there's so many things. When I look and you don't know what's working until hindsight, right? You could have the best business plan, the best marketing plan, do all of your financials, but you don't know how well they serve you until hindsight. And I think one of the biggest for me obstacles is that I am a creative mind. So if I could sit here and write all day and write content, I would be so happy. But I know that there's a lot more that has to go into place. And so you probably read or you're aware of the book The E Myth. It was written years ago. It came into my life just at the right time. It was probably like a year into the business, and I was working, you know how entrepreneurs work. I was probably working 12, 13, 14 hours a day, meeting with clients, getting them on board, passing them to the strategists. And I read the E Myth, and the one phrase in there said, "Are you going to work on your business or in your business?" Because I was working in my business. And that was a transformational moment. I went and brought in a marketing person. I brought in a CFO, and they were fractional. So they weren't working just for me. Fractional wasn't even talked about then, but I went to them and said, "Add me to your portfolio. I know you have really big clients, but add me to your portfolio." And that changed everything because now I had people taking care of those things that I no longer had to spend those extra 4 hours a day working on. And so I started working on my business instead of in my business. Now I work in my business all the time because I do all the writing for our newsletters and all of our social media. But other individuals take that and give it the punch, do with it what their subject matter expertise is, and take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. The e-myth has been a topic that's come up on the podcast several times
Yeah,
because
I
it is
know.
a myth. Just because you're good at something, we already talked about it. If you're good at something, painting, for example, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to build a big business painting.
Right.
If you had a magic AI robot that could solve one recurrent problem, it sounds like it might be content, but what problem would you eliminate?
So, one of the biggest challenges resume writers are having right now, and I just wrote about that, how to hire a resume writer, because a lot of them are using ChatGPT. They're taking the content from a previous resume and throwing it into AI, whether it's Claude or whatever it may be. And then they're getting this product that is speaking in the same tone as all the other people that they have worked with. And then they give it to their client, and their client starts applying for positions. What I'm hearing from recruiters and hiring managers is they could spot an AI written resume right off the bat because it's losing that human touch, that human tone, that human voice. So we have been incorporating and trying to teach our AI to have more of a human voice by introducing it to emotional intelligence. So we have now branded Career EQ as part of this whole concept, going back to what would I want? We'll never humanize AI, but we could teach it language by introducing IP. And that intellectual property for us is emotional intelligence that starts to give it a voice. And so I won't tell you the name that I give all of my AI. They all have their own name because some of them are probably not supposed to be for public consumption, but it is something that I wished we could introduce. And I do think that the language will start to work its way, but I think you have to be able to isolate it by giving it your IP. And I know a lot of companies are doing that right now, introducing their IP, but how do you introduce your voice? So ChatGPT today asked me when I was asking it some questions, would you like that in Dr. J's voice? And I'm like, yes, finally. And I even said, thank you, ChatGPT, for asking me because it's starting to learn me, but it's taken a very long time. It's taken like probably a year for it to really start to ask if I want it in Dr. J's voice because I use certain language, I use certain words. My vocabulary isn't that big. So we have to be able to teach it. So I guess that's what I would love to see. How do we humanize it more? Give it that. How do we humanize it quickly or quicker? Because we could start to give it our tone and our voice, but how do we do it quickly so that when I'm working with a candidate, I'm able to give it their voice quickly?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that to me would be the real amazing impact. I probably have to invest in that company because that would be capturing it quickly.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for sure, especially with as much content as you're putting out there,
Mhm.
even just for yourself. I mean, AI can get us 90, 95% of the way there. I will also say too, though, like for us, we have our AI booking calls for us, and we booked in the month of November 50 calls, 50, maybe plus or minus one. Month of December, we're the first weekend, we booked 13 calls, but there's still no replacement for the human element. I will always say
Right.
that. I'll always lead off and say AI can have these one-to-one conversations at scale. However, you still need to be the one taking the calls, introducing the human element, the JuliAnna element, whatever. But there is no replacement, at least not on this stage. And I think that'd be a pretty scary place if there was.
Yeah, and that's why I know it won't happen. That's why I ask for AI to learn it quicker, to learn that voice quicker. And it's sort of like we use a lot of psychometric tools to really understand the person's behaviors, personality quickly, because we don't have a lifetime to learn about them. We don't even have a week in many instances. We need to move quickly. So we use a lot of these intake and assessments. So that's how we have been able to learn someone quickly. So that is my wish is that AI would learn people quickly. Something, some sort of intake that they really start to understand someone and then they can get closer to their voice. There's nothing out there that's going to give us that final voice. That's why you need to edit. and understand the person and use their language. But all the research that we have been doing really does say more and more companies are looking for that X factor, because on paper they could look perfect, but they need to have that emotional intelligence that fit within the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes total sense for sure. Super important to be authentically yourself. Even though it is AI, it's still just a tool to be a
It is.
produce content, words that are authentically a representation of yourself. Let's end here because you shared, which was an amazing, mind blowing stat you shared when we first spoke. 38% of people who are looking for new jobs already have a job. So if someone
Oh,
is
it's actually higher. It's 65%.
65%, wow, my God.
65%. It has grown exponentially.
Yeah, that's nearly double what we first
Yes,
shared when we first spoke.
what we were first talking about. Yep,
That is insane. Wow. That just goes to show dissatisfaction in today's workforce. But
right.
if someone is listening and they're unhappy, they're maybe part of that 65% who's unhappy in the job, but doesn't know where to start, or they want to start and make efficient, be super efficient about the effort they put in. What's the first step they can take to possibly work with?
They just need to reach out to us because there is not a person that we work with that hasn't had a conversation. 30-minute to 45-minute conversation, because we also need to look at compatibility and we have to look at expectations. So they just need to reach out to careerlifeacademy.com, and there's a form there that they could fill out, or they could go on to LinkedIn and IM us. We're very approachable. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. So we're very approachable, very findable. But it first starts with a conversation, human to human. That's where it all starts.
Beautiful. Well said, Juliana. Appreciate you for sharing your website, being your giving the listeners a way to reach you. You're on LinkedIn as well. You're on all the other channels as you mentioned. Juliana, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom with us. There's at least 65% of people out there who could potentially use your service, and absolutely they would get some benefit for sure, because the scientific model, addicting yourself to a process that will 100% work, is much better than the spray and pray method. So
Yes.
for anyone listening, reach out to Juliana if you are in that boat, looking for the next chapter of your life, to open that next chapter. And if you like more stories like this from other leaders who are really pushing and driving the envelope as far as their business growth, as well as sharing their expertise, make sure to tune in to Jumpify Labs for more. My name is Jay. Thanks so much. Talk again soon.